What is up, everybody? RLTK podcast. Jordan here, kicking it with Chris as usual. And we have a guest, as you can see, this guy over here. Introduce him in a second. Chris, what's going on?
What's up, bro?
Bro, it's a good day, but it's not a good day.
Why
because we have an Eagles fan on the podcast.
Let's go.
That's crazy, right? That just hit me. I don't think I want to do this podcast anymore.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately for you, you don't have a choice. We're doing it.
Look, congratulations, on whatever you did. I didn't watch it. And so
yeah, I don't even know what happened. Who won the Super Bowl?
Yeah, who won? Actually,
I have no idea.
What is the Super
Chief
Bowl?
three-peat.
You're just salty. That's
it doesn't even matter. Super Bowl doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter anymore. Super Bowl. That's a good point. The Super Bowl actually doesn't even matter anymore. Who cares?
Hey, it's where rust and moth destroy. You know what I'm saying? It's not an it's not an eternal treasure. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, we're getting biblical over here.
So, anyways, this is our friend, longtime friend Marcelino.
Yes, sir.
What's cracking?
No, man, I'm happy to be here. Happy to chop it up and just share some words, man.
I do have a question. Why Eagles, bro? Why Eagles, bro?
Why? I have a connection. When I was in college, fraternity brother of mine kind of got me hooked, and
he was an Eagle.
That's your old life.
Yeah,
and now you're created.
That was before Christ.
So now you're a Christian cowboy.
Even now as a Christian, that's part of my life. So I gotta keep on living.
Okay, I got you. You still got 1 foot in sin. I get
it. Eagles fans need Jesus too, brother.
They do.
I'm converted.
In fact, they're irredeemable. That's what it is.
Oh man,
you're just salty, man. Come on.
It's in the book of second opinions, bro.
It's the book.
Eagles
of second
fans.
Opinions.
Eagles fans are irredeemable.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yo, super grateful to have you here.
Thanks,
big
brother.
facts.
You guys will be seeing Marcelino in one shape or another, and that's hilarious, by the way. Pun intended. Because he'll be doing some stuff with Reframe, helping on the back end. He's incredibly organized. I'm not.
Yeah.
In case you guys couldn't tell, anybody who knows me knows that. Anybody who knows Chris knows that. And so, as we continue to develop this thing, get more resources in you guys' hands, and we got some really cool stuff coming down the pipeline that we're not quite ready to announce yet, but it's going to be a game changer. As those things happen, we're going to be scaling and doing what the Lord's called us to do. So super excited for that. But what we figured today, partly tied into some really cool stuff that Marcelino is going to be doing, and aside or next to working with us, is talking about what does the church need to look like in order to reach this generation? I mean, we talk about it a lot, and I guess we're going a little bit broader today, just to have like a wider conversation where we kind of just share some of our perspectives and ideas on what that actually means. But bro, I'd love you to share about what you're up to.
Yeah. So recently, I was with a church in Phoenix, and left that. God's called us, my family and I, to plant a church. Something that's been in our hearts for a couple of years now, and we kind of God kind of pushed us out to say, "Hey, I need you to be uncomfortable."
Welcome to suffering, brother.
Yeah,
guarantee.
Yeah, fact.
But I'm working with some great organizations, Small Town Network. Shout out to them. Passion for Planning, doing a residency through them, and 2026 we make our move to Flagstaff, and then hopefully within 10 months from that, we'll start having services.
Yeah, that's super dope, bro. So when you think of it, be praying for Marcelino as he gets ready to plant, which is super dope, which is why we thought, let's have this conversation about what this even looks like. So, I want to throw that question out for you guys as we kind of get this thing going. Like, what are some of the essential things that we need to do as a church? And I know we usually talk about youth ministry, but I think we can go a little bit wider today just for the sake of Marcelino.
Yeah.
What do you guys think we need to do in order to reach this next generation as a church? What are the unique things about them that we need to be considering as we build the church that they're going to be raised in and they're going to take over one day?
Well, I think if we're going back to the first thing I think about is, one, our conversations are going to start shifting because Gen Z is starting to transition to college now. And so that's going to be something that
we got Gen A coming up.
Yep.
Right.
So they're going to take over when it comes to middle school and high school, and then
Gen Beta.
Then Gen Z is going to be in college, right? And that's something that we're used to, right? College ministry. So that's going to be that's going to be interesting to come back to that, actually. Because when we did college ministry,
different world.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't even
different
make it
world.
But
canceled immediately.
Facts.
We did some out of pocket stuff and
made it in the newspaper. Facts.
Yeah, facts, bro.
But
good times.
Great times. But I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is, what our ancestors always did was preserve knowledge. I think the biggest thing for me is to preserve the knowing of Christ, to preserve the gospel, to preserve what that means, and the theology that came from that.
I like the way you put that.
And so I think that is something that if we're going to be somewhat of a light, somewhat of an influence, if we're going to have conversations, we have to be able to preserve the knowing of Christ and what comes with that philosophically, theologically. We have to preserve that, even though we may have some wrestlings of our own in that. But the core value,
doctrine,
it needs to be preserved if we're going to continue this on, because they're going to carry that. And as we see, the scriptures God has faithfully preserved his word through generations. And so it's somewhat also our burden.
That's good, bro.
Carry that on as well.
That's a good point. So you would argue like the main thing is we are responsible for faithfully passing down the scriptures to them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can't fail at that. And I think, like, to your point, that's more important than ever, because we live in a post-Christian society.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
I would go that far.
Yeah, I would too.
And so, as a consequence, people aren't being raised in contexts anymore where faith is learned by osmosis. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's not things implicit in the culture that teach you about the faith.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of times when kids are walking through our doors, they have no concept of anything when it comes to scripture or Bible. I mean, maybe they bumped into something online. Maybe they've had some conversations, but not in the same way it was 15, 20, 25 years ago, right? And so as a consequence, we have to be real clear in communicating who God is, what he's like, what he's done, why that matters, what the implications are for their life. All that stuff's important. I think the really cool thing about that, though, is we get a clean slate. So, like, there isn't all that baggage, the church baggage, right?
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I just think it exists way less, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I think kids are coming in with a clean slate and they don't understand all these things. And then we get to explain it to them from that perspective. Like, we're not having them unlearn a bunch of stuff to learn stuff. They're just learning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I like that because it also tackles the language of the generation, right? The scriptures use a particular language that this generation really doesn't use. And so we have a chance to actually flush out what these things mean and why they have a conflicting nature between the conflicting nature of how you use language and how the scripture use languages. Because of what I also find when I have conversations with people is that they struggle with how you describe a thing. Like, why would you describe it that way? So when we say that something exists, what do you mean by exist? And then you have to go into, well, it has to exist outside of the framework of my mind. It has to be observed. Like, all these things, I think we have an opportunity to actually explain why we choose to use the words that we use as Christians. So I think that's another thing that we can be able to do as we're out there having conversations with people, is challenge the language of the culture.
Yeah, that's good. How do we provide that a message? We teach them in a way that they're going to be able to understand it, right? Because in this generation, they speak differently, they act differently, they look at different things to what I'm used to. And I'm a little bit older than you guys. I would say a little bit, because 43 is not that far from 30 something.
Yeah,
but
don't hate. You older than me. It's all good.
That's right. The gray shows it. The gray show it.
Amen.
But how do we effectively communicate the gospel to this new generation?
Well, I think right now, we're in an interesting place where the gospel kind of brings out itself automatically. Okay. And I think it starts with questioning things. Like, why do you think the way you think? And why do you think this is true? And I think questions has an interesting way of breaking down thoughts of, wow, maybe I actually don't believe that. So like when I tell you about my day and how busy I thought it was, and you start to ask me, well, what did you do? And when did you do that? And when did you start? And you're like, oh, well, maybe my day wasn't that busy. I just felt overwhelmed.
Right.
And so I think like to some degree, the way we can communicate gospel is through questioning what they think they know or what they believe. And I think the gospel kind of just shows itself. I think that's a unique way that we can share the gospel. Because when you put them in a place of an open-minded state, then you can share like, well, this is why I think this is true. This is why I believe. This is why the gospel is true in my life. And then you open up a conversation of something else that is interesting. And I think like remember when we used to challenge each other, or hey, pick up this sock and explain the gospel to me, something like that. We used to do that all the time. So I think we have to challenge each other on how to present the gospel in an
Right.
interesting way, right?
Yeah.
Because again, I think the enemy is using language to deceive humanity.
That's good.
And so I think the one way we can communicate the gospel is through just sitting down and asking questions, and just not be offended by the things that they say. Be aware
That's
that
good,
they're
bro.
going to say things that you're just not
Just
going to agree
off.
with. It's
Right.
going to be off.
Just wild. Like, huh?
I find it
You believe
exciting.
what?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And
You
so-
said what about God?
yeah, exactly. That's
You know
what I
what I'm saying?
think. That's what I think you should do.
No, that's really good, bro. I think something you said too that like is really important is there's an emotional nature to how this generation communicates. They're very much driven by how they feel. And so
Mhm.
I think like we have to tap into that too, like the inner world, what's going on internally, and more specifically how Christ wants to meet them in their inner world,
Right.
Yeah.
right? But then I think they're like once they respond to that, there has to then be this calling, and this gets into like doctrine and theology, calling from living internally to externally.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So like understanding like, yo, you're a part of the church. Yo, this means that you don't just live for yourself. This means that you're a part of this community and you are responsible for caring for other people as they care for you,
Right.
and blah, 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 so on and so forth. You're responsible for using your gifts and talents for the sake of others. Because I think if we just lived out the gospel the way it's supposed to be lived out,
Right.
it would be incredibly countercultural. And I know that's like cliche and easy to say,
Mhm.
but I think especially in this moment that we find ourselves in a very individualized, self-actualized, inward-focused society, like the gospel is very opposite to a lot of those things.
Mhm.
And it's not that God doesn't care about what's going on with us as individuals, and yet Scripture doesn't talk about individuals
At all.
No.
at all.
At all.
I mean, it shares stories of people,
Right.
Mhm.
but that is in the larger framework of what God was doing in that person's life to explain a history to a group of people so they could understand who they were.
Mhm.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So once again, even if the Bible talks about an individual, it's for the sake of a collective.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
I think once again, like the gospel itself, kind of what you're speaking to, can kind of, if we're living into it the way we're supposed to, it's going to be very transformative for this generation, which to me is super encouraging and exciting.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
I agree. And I think what's dope about the gospel is that it's such an objective reality. It's so objectively true that it can hit every area of the human condition. So one way I explain the cross, and I was explaining this to somebody, is that I see the cross as a moral correction. And so like we can talk about how the obvious, everyone has heard it because we have yelled it from mountaintops, from roofs, from speakers on the corner of the streets, right? God has died on the cross and risen 3 days, and he's coming back one day with wrath and he's saving his people. What does that really mean though? And I think that is the fun part. I think the fun part is communicating that in a philosophical way that makes sense, because I think the scriptures can do that. And so I always say that the cross, when I look at it, I see it as a symbol of moral correction, a bridge to God to man, and not just in the sense of Sky Daddy pointing his finger, but in a sense that the real, one of the core reasons is that we are all immoral, and it's an it is an unescapable immoral
Mm.
that you cannot leave. And he has sent his son to correct that immorality, right? A more of a higher ethical standard, which Gen Z cares about, right?
Right.
When it comes to social justice and equality and mental health, the treatment of others, the planet, right? So to some degree, there is evidence that Gen Z cares about things ethically.
Okay.
And so we can also dive into what that means with Christian ethics.
Mm.
And
That's
so
good.
I
Really
think
good.
that is a conversation like communicating the gospel. I think that is something that we can do when it comes to something like that.
And as much as they care about social justice and all the issues
Yep.
in the world,
Mhm.
how much of that is a trend, and how much of that is real,
Yeah, it's true.
and how much of that is a fact? Like, yes, I care about these things because I care about them, or I care about them because that's what everybody's doing.
Yeah. That's a good, bro. That's so good. Okay, you gonna say? I'm sorry. You gonna say?
Yeah, I guess I'll take a crack at it. I think both are true at the same time. I think there's this reality that Gen Z does want to do something. I think they don't know how.
Mm.
I think, like, once again, it ties back to that inner life, overwhelmed, like confused, not sure what to do next type.
Yeah.
And I think, once again, this is where the church steps in. I think we can show them out of the gospel how that leads to change in our communities, change in our neighborhoods, caring about the poor,
Yeah.
caring about the issues that we have on a local level, caring about if there are issues of racism in our context, if there are issues of sexism, whatever. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not talking, and I'm saying in our context on purpose.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I think, once again, those have become broad brush issues that we try and wipe everything with that brush, and that doesn't work.
Mm.
Like, it's not a single variant analysis. It's multivariant, right? There are a ton of things happening at once in every locale, and those are nuanced based on locale, right?
Mhm.
What's happening here is not happening in other parts of the country. There might be some things that are happening
Mhm.
consistently, right?
Mhm.
But like how that's working itself out and how it's affecting people and what the particular issues are here are a little bit different.
Mhm.
And so, like, how I engage here is going to be different than how I engage on the West Coast or how I engage on the East Coast. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I think, like, we got to pay attention to those things and figure out how we engage in our specific context, which I also think speaks to Gen Z as well, because they're tribal. I think they're going to force the church to get smaller, more intimate, more connected, like, because that's what they want. They want mentorship. They want people in their lives. They want to be in relationship. And so I think if we will apply the gospel, right, not just proclaim it, but live it out,
Mhm.
if we're people of peace who, live at a different pace, that's slower, that's more peaceful, that like, why are you not rushed? Why are you not panicking? Why are you not on social media all the time? Why are you not concerned about all these things that are happening? Why are you not freaking out? Right?
Mm.
How come you have hope in the midst of mental health challenges? Like, all these things that we can present to them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Why do you give your money to the poor? Why do you go serve every week at the food kitchen? Why do you have a relationship with the homeless person that lives on the corner? Like, all of those different types of things can point them to, like, well, it's because I have this relationship with Jesus and I believe his kingdom is coming and I'm trying to proclaim it to the world. And it lives on the inside of me.
That's good.
Right. And so, yeah, I think that ties into it.
I like that.
Like, we can take them from it being a trend to it actually being
something they live out.
They really do. Yeah, they live it out.
Do you think so? You think it has to start as a trend? Because I think one of the things that social media has done, it has made depravity the trend. It has made,
Well, it is a trend for sure, right? So, and I think with this generation, we've said this a bunch of times, infamy and fame aren't different. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that is like the polarization and the nature of what social media is. It rewards you the same way.
Yeah.
Good or bad. Yeah.
Exactly. And so because of that, infamy and fame are the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I'm doing OF or I'm doing something legitimate for society, like, I don't know, some massive cars where I'm feeding a bunch of homeless people or whatever else, like,
the reward is
the unfortunate thing is one of them's going to get more attention. And guess what?
Yep.
It's not feeding the homeless. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so, like, because of that, if my goal is to draw attention to myself, depending on who I am, that one of those is significantly easier than the other.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And social media is going to reward me. And let's just keep it a buck. Society is going to reward me at this point.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? Because we've completely removed the concept of things being shameful.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I've been seeing that conversation flow around a lot too, bringing back shame. And I think like that has to be, I think that word has to be addressed again. In a sense, not just internalizing it, but also the value it brings.
Right.
I think shame does bring a particular value that helps you to pursue the good.
Right.
Well, this is the thing, right? Like to your point, and I know I'm taking up a bunch of air, but I'm gonna do it anyways. I think there's two different types of shame. Like we always talk about as in postmodern ideology, definitions grow, right?
Yep.
They expand. And I
Yep.
think the definition of what shame is expanded. And it's gone from like we understood shame in the context of culture, right?
Yeah.
Honor shame culture. So like there were things that if I did, I shamed my family, I shamed my community. And so I wouldn't do those things because I cared about the group, collective, and what we believed as a group, right? Now shame is this more internalized thing.
It's an individual.
Right? Correct. And so it's more about like, and how we would describe it in the clinical space is guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. Right.
Yeah.
And it comes with this problem with us being more focused on the inner life.
So
right?
shame is a following culture.
Correct. In a sense. And so like, I understand what people are doing and saying like, let's remove shame. We don't want people to feel like they're broken beyond repair and there's nothing that can be done. And so they should take their own lives or whatever. We don't want that.
Yeah.
And so, but as a consequence of that, what we've also done is removed the corporate, societal, cultural idea of shame.
Yeah.
Right. And so those two became synonymous. Now we remove both and now everything is up. Everything is up for grabs.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of conviction and condemnation. Like, you want people to feel convicted.
Yeah.
You want to feel a little ashamed because
Yeah.
what you did was wrong, but we're not condemning you. Like, you're not broken and unrepairable.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I like that.
But an original, like I was reading this book. Oh, what's it called? It's by this guy named Hans Boers, man. He's talking about before hermeneutics. So the like how to understand reading the Bible, there's metaphysics, right?
Yeah.
And he was talking, and it's like Origen, it's like Augustine, those guys, and they're talking about this idea of like, originally, one of the ways that we understood what was true and right was actually how our conscience responded to certain things in certain contexts. So like, if I was in a certain context and said something, and you get that, ooh, I knew, I shouldn't be saying that.
Yeah.
Now we live in a context where we kind of explain those things away.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Now people are becoming more shameless.
Correct.
In society. Yeah.
Right. And so like, to your point about conviction and condemnation, it's like, you want to feel that check, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, I need to go apologize. Oh, that isn't like, as I'm thinking through this, no, there's something that just feels off about that. Like, I think that's a good thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, once again, that conscience, so to speak, has to be shaped by something.
Yeah.
And if it's not being shaped by the scriptures, it's being shaped by something else.
Yeah. That's true. So would you say more it's like an internal instinct, consciousness awareness type deal. And I don't know if, like, we're talking about how can the church be more impactful and influential in society. I think by the church bringing back this idea of cultural shaming within the church, not in the sense of condemning them, but helping them to stay on the path of righteousness. Because even God disciplines us, right? He disciplines those he loves.
Yep.
And even sometimes when God convicts, like, man, I don't want to feel that right now, God, but it's good for you, right? And how he always brings it back up over and over until, And so to some degree, feeling bad is good.
Yeah.
But in culture, feeling bad is bad.
Correct.
Right.
And here's my question for both of you. How do we, because one of the major movements in our society is acceptance, right?
Yeah.
Or so it's like, how do you balance? Okay, so you have people come into your local church context, or you have kids coming into your youth group. You want them to understand, like, fundamentally, hey, these things are morally incorrect to do. But what if they're doing them?
Yeah.
Like, what we've said is like, hey, we want you to be a part. We want you to belong, be a part of this community. We love you regardless, and like we want you to know Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So like, where's the line in that? Like, of okay, I get what you're saying. Like, is that culture or shame like implicit or explicit?
Well, I think that's a good question.
Do you get what I'm
Good
saying?
Yeah, I
question.
do.
I think it's implicit. Just
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw that out there because I think if you're proclaiming the truth to students
Mhm.
and they're doing things that they're not supposed to be doing, or you're proclaiming the truth in church and you're doing stuff you're not supposed to be doing, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that should affect you, like even if other people around you don't know, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody got dirt.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody got stuff they ain't
Yeah,
supposed to be
that's
doing,
true. Yeah.
and that's why Christ came, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To deal with the penalty of that, but also to transform us. And so
Yeah.
we're all still dealing with sin.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's implicit.
I think the wrestle with that though is the wrestle with the light of what that brings. So I think like
Or maybe it's both.
this one thing I don't like, probably. I think it was Ayn Rand who said, don't be open-minded, but be active-minded. So I think one of the downfalls, and this is my personal opinion, I don't like being open-minded. So I think being open-minded is the reason why we're in this position that we are. Open to new ideas, open to new possibilities, open to new pleasures. I'm bored with this life. What else can I do? I'm just open to new things. And I think that is the wrong path to take. I think to help them is to be active minded. And what that means is just to be a critical thinker. It's to think through the things you think on a daily basis and the things that you like to indulge in. Because pleasure is a heck of a drug, and it's amazing and it's fun and it helps you escape things, and it helps you to just experience this existence. But there are pleasures that bring about decay, and and sometimes you don't see that decay until it's too late,
Right.
or it makes you feel like it's you can't escape it, right? And so I think part of the things that we need to help them do is to think through these things and challenging them, and to let them just be upset with what that thing is.
I was just saying, but open-mindedness, we have to be careful because we assume that being open-minded means you're okay with everything. You affirm everything that's out there. But
Mhm.
open-mindedness also has to come with limitations. Open-mindedness also has to come in with you bringing in your morals and values. Although some of the young people, if they're not growing up with some of those examples at home or with Jesus in their life, they're
Mhm.
not going to know what some of those things are.
Mhm.
So once they're in church and they're going through these things, they're doing these things, they're going to need somebody that has a good moral compass to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong, but I'm not pointing it out because I'm going to condemn you. It's because I want to walk alongside you
Yeah.
and teach you and help you. So
Yeah.
we have to be realize that, yes, we need to be open-minded, but there is a limit to what that open-mindedness looks like.
But see, even in that, you're pointing out a value structure, right? Because what you're showing them is by pointing out, by saying, hey, this here is kind of immoral, it's wrong. There's an assumption there that you have a value structure that you have that you want them to have. So you kind of upholding a value structure and I agree with that. But that starts the conversation of why it's wrong. And
Yeah.
sometimes the reason why they ask that is because they don't want to give it up.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
And so that's the challenge, right?
Right.
And to help them to see why this value structure that we have is way more better than the one that you have. Because the one you have, it's pleasurable. It's pleasurable. It helps you escape. It gives you a sense of a perceived life
Right.
living.
Right.
But at the end, it is a path to decay.
Right.
And so I think that's why I say you have to challenge the mind in thinking through that thing.
Right.
But I do agree with you. They have to have some level of open mindedness. And I do like when you said it has some moral implication to that.
Right.
I do agree with that. So it's kind of like you're challenging their own landscape of what they think is ethically correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I think on this issue that we're talking about, this moral landscape and all that stuff, I think with this generation, they don't understand that they have a framework.
Really?
Yes. And this comes back to the critical thinking piece and the values piece. So for them, open-mindedness means truly open-mindedness, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But that's
Literally,
actually
literal.
not.
Let me try it all.
It's actually not possible
To be open-minded, yeah. Well,
because everybody has to have a value set.
Right?
yeah, you're right.
You have a landing place that you start from, even if it is like totally out there and wild and wacky.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's where you start.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they've been taught though is that like they don't have one when they actually do. And I think once again, everybody has one because everybody has a point where they're willing to say that's wrong.
Yeah, that's why.
You get what I'm saying?
That's why more
like there's horrible, horrendous things that we could name that everybody would say.
Yeah,
that's immoral.
Yeah,
everybody.
Yeah,
even people who say like morality is not a thing, they would stop at that point and they would come up with some other way of saying it's immoral.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and so because of that, everybody has a value set. And so what we've got to help them understand is that they have one, and then ask them, okay, what is it? Let's identify it, and then the next question is that the best moral set? Is that the best value set to have? Is that the best way to conduct yourself? Is that even working out for you?
Right. But to add to that, at some point in their young age, they knew what was right and wrong. That was taught to them. So at some point, they broke from that and said, hey, I'm just going to be open-minded to whatever I want. So they had a standard that they started with. At some point, they just went out the door. And there has to be a reminder like, hey, where did you start off here? Like, what point in your life did this go south? What point in your life was it okay for you to do the things that you're doing?
And I think there are, like, to your point, I think there are more families who have raised their kids with less of a value set or more freedom to discern that value set themselves.
Yes.
And the scary thing about that is all you're doing is letting somebody else determine the value set. Right. They're not determining their value set.
Yeah. Nobody
does that for themselves.
Yeah.
At least not until you're older. And even then, it's a matter of like, what are you going to allow to influence you?
Yeah.
Like, I've been having this conversation a lot lately. It's like, it's not a matter of original thought in the sense that I'm going to go discover and find my own ideas. Like, all of our ideas and notions and assumptions about the world are shaped by the people that came before us, the people that have influenced us, the books that we've read, the videos that we've consumed, the movies that we've watched, the conversations that we've had, the places that we've been. All of those things are absolutely true. And so we get to decide what influences us. And the Bible puts it this way, right? You're a slave to sin or you're a slave to righteousness, right? There's no in between.
Yeah.
And so once again, the crazy thing about it is, if I as a parent say I'm going to give my child the freedom to figure it out themselves, all I'm doing is allowing somebody else to determine what they believe.
Right.
That's all I'm doing.
That's true.
I'm basically just handing off that responsibility to whoever. Which is crazy.
I mean, it's
right?
true, but yet it's conflated though, right? Well, it's a double-edged sword though, because I mean, Proverbs talks about raise your kid up how they should be, and then even if they go away, they'll come back to it. So to some degree, Proverbs acknowledges the influence of the world.
Yeah.
It acknowledges how powerful the ideas of the world is, and how crafty and convincing that it is. It's very, the world isn't dumb. It's very good at crafting words, okay? And it's very convincing. And I think that's the danger part, right? I think the danger that society has let this younger generation is that it's telling them that you can create your own ethical landscape. The illusion of that, even though we influence that, you can create your own ethical landscape. And by doing that, they create this own framework of what they think they can do, preferences, what they judge to be right and wrong. And I think this is going to be the challenge of the church, because we don't have our own ethical landscape. We've surrendered that. Now, we may wrestle with it. I know I do. I know y'all do, right?
Yep.
We wrestle with this. Why this, God? Why now? Where are you? Talk to me. Help me. I can't see where I'm going. Like, We wrestle with this. And so the daily task of a Christian is surrendering their landscape of what they think is right. And I think like that is the challenging part of the church, is to challenge that landscape of what they think is right and wrong and being okay with it. So like, for example, we was talking about social justice, right? Now, my personal opinion, I don't think this idea of social justice, I don't know if we're going to see the justice that we want. And even in that, when I look at people out there protesting, when I see them fighting, when I see them gathering finances, I also see a sacrifice of morals, right? I see them um, like they're just repeating the nature of what's been given to them, right? They're doing the same thing that their oppressor did. You're not doing anything different. You're just saying that it's good because you're fighting back with the same tools. You're not doing anything different. So to some degree, I want to ask y'all this question. Do y'all think um when it comes to fighting for justice, do y'all see the sacrifice of morals as well when y'all see that? 'Cause that's what I see when I look at it.
Man, that's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, because I think that impacts Gen Z.
Yeah, and also it depends on what we're talking about, what social justice issue we're talking about.
Okay.
Because I mean, man, the whole Black Lives Matter thing.
Yep. Yep.
That came from an idea that was like, hey, Black Lives will matter, and then you got hit with something else at the back end of that,
Mm-hmm.
and then the aftermath of what was happening on the streets,
Mm-hmm.
through the protests and all that. So your morals do get compromised.
Yep.
Because now you're accepting, hey, I'm protesting this, but I'm gonna go and steal and do this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you forgot what the main thing was, is to
Yeah.
talk about Black lives are being impacted here.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Mhm.
it really depends on the issue.
Okay.
But I
Yeah,
do also think that your morals are compromised when you're
Mhm.
fighting for what you think is right.
Yeah. I agree with
And
that.
the emotionalism of it, like how caught up you get in it, and how
Yeah.
quickly you are willing
Yeah.
to
Yep.
justify the compromise of a certain thing for
Mhm.
said thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, well, if they did it, we can do it.
Yep.
I mean, it's incredibly challenging and difficult to think about. And then you inject Jesus into the conversation, it becomes even more complicated.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, bro. I mean, look, even his disciples, when it was like, look, when he was walking with his disciples, the disciples was like, look, are you going to overthrow Rome? Are we going to get our place back? He wasn't concerned with any of that.
Right.
He said, nope, you're going to go preach the gospel. You're going to do the work of God's will. And I mean, because God already knew, like we talked about earlier, Rome fell on its own thing. Why do I need to overthrow something that's going to overthrow itself, right?
Right.
And so, like, as Christians, I think this is the challenging part for the church. How can we show them the way to fight for justice in the sense that at the end, when God says vengeance is mine, when he said that, he meant that. And he's going to correct things. He's going to bring things back to order. He is going to get rid of the inherent evil of this world. He's going to do that. But he's called us to stand in the midst of it for now, right? And to stand for people and to help them out. But it's like, that is the challenging part I see for the church when it comes to social justice, because we want things to be corrected in this world, this planet, this realm,
Right.
which I don't think we're called to do that.
And I think that's the point, right? The point is that, I mean, you do me wrong, I want to get you back.
Yeah.
Like I want you to hurt now.
Yeah. Eye for an eye. Yeah.
But in reality,
Yeah.
it is through sitting through a nervousness of like, hey, you know what? I need to turn the other cheek. I need to be okay sitting in this uncomfortable spot that I know that God's going to take care of it. It's
Yeah.
hard
Mhm.
because now we're talking about understanding the humanity of people,
Yeah.
because we're all God's children. But I
Yeah.
think as a church, we should also, I'll say this, as a church, we should acknowledge the hurt that people have.
Mm.
Whatever context, whatever community you're in, if there's something going on, we should acknowledge it as a church.
Yeah.
The danger is when we start from the pulpit addressing everybody's concerns,
Mm.
it sways us away from the gospel.
Mm.
Because yes, is there issues with racism? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there issues with, I mean, same sex, all that stuff? Yeah, we should talk about it. Let's address the hurt.
Mhm.
But let's let's focus on what the main thing is. Like
Yeah.
I don't want you to hurt. Jesus doesn't want you to hurt.
Mm.
But we're not gonna turn it into something that it's not.
Mm.
I also
Yeah.
think I always wonder this: how helpful is it? And this is a question, and I'm gonna talk on it a little bit. How helpful is it to address some of these issues publicly? And the reason I say that is, once again, I think about the influence of social media, the polarizing nature of it, and like I've seen a couple people take really balanced approaches, and that's when they speak to both sides, and I always really appreciate that.
Yep.
I appreciated something Eugene Cho posted on USA the other day that was a really balanced approach. Like, there's good things happening and there's bad things happening, and we need to pray that God's will be done. I'm like, thank you.
Yep.
You know? But oftentimes it's usually one way or the other. And it's not because it's just that that's the issue that this dude was speaking on. But
right.
I think about all these other issues, and I'm like, when I'm in relationship with people, when I'm breaking bread with them, when I'm spending time with their families, and we're having these conversations about these really important issues, racism, LGBTQ stuff, socioeconomics, like all of those things, I've had way more beneficial conversations, learned way more, being challenged way more, and challenged others more when it's in my living room versus online.
Yeah.
It's just, or like on a Sunday morning. And once again, I'm not saying that doesn't mean that we don't talk about these things, but I think we have to be really wise in how we talk about them publicly because of the polarizing nature of our world and the fact that everything ends up online and then gets taken out of context. You know, something that you said in a 10-minute, communication that was balanced and well thought out and spoke to both sides really well and focused on Jesus. Somebody takes 30 seconds of that, turns it into a reel, and next thing you know, it goes viral because you hate black people, or you know, you want to overthrow the government, or you know,
but now you're canceled though.
Exactly, right? And so I think that's a challenge for the church, which kind of leads me to my next question. And you guys can answer both of those. Give me thoughts on both of those. Like, how does the church engage in the digital world? Because we have to engage in it, but I think there's a ton of challenges in engaging with the short clips and the pace of things, and like how do we balance that, bro? And how do we balance it for the sake of this next generation? Because we got to go there because they're there, I think. But how do we do it? You know?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think. Well, the thing that comes to my mind is, I get what you're saying. Like, there is a difference between the conversations we have in the homes where it's covered, private, way more intimate and personal, than where it's online where everybody can see it, everybody has an opinion, everybody can comment. Right? We're forced in this. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
You in the digital space?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we're forced in it. I think we have no choice but to go here.
I agree.
I think the backlash of society will always come. People will always misinterpret it because we don't know how to interpret. Fundamentally, we don't know how to interpret things properly. And when it comes to, anyways, these things are going to happen regardless. And I think when it comes to casting your net, whatever fish you catch is the fish you catch, and you deal with that. And I think that is the beauty of it, right? Where to some degree, if you don't catch all the fish, that's fine. If you catch one fish, praise God, let's deal with that. And so I think when it comes to being on the internet, it's just going to come with it. It doesn't matter how positive you are, how good you try to be, how accepting you try to be. There's always going to be somebody that's going to misinterpret it and be negative towards it. That's just what it's going to be online. It is more safer to be negative online than it is to be in person, right? Same, because the person that's negative on the comment section, they won't be like that in front of your face because they don't know what it is. Right?
Facts.
And so that's just the nature. People feel safe online, in which that is cool. Cool. I'm not afraid of ideas. I enjoy dabbling in ideas because I understand the resource of where truth comes from. So I'm okay with it. Let's go there. If you want to come with some crazy idea, I'm like, cool, let's entertain it. I think this is why I brought in this is why I was talking about the ethical landscape, is because God gave us this thing called logic, and logic has been discovered through mathematicians and philosophers, in the sense of there are laws to thinking, right? There are laws and ways to how to think things through. If God is, he's not a God of confusion, right? He's a God that makes sense. If that is true, then he also created a pattern of thought, which is called the laws of logic, to help us to understand what's been determined. We have no need to be afraid. We need to be prepared, studied, and ready to have a conversation. So I think there is no need to push back. I think we should lean in and say, well, let's have these dialogues. Why do you think this is wrong and evil and things of that nature? And so when it comes to certain things of conversations, I'm down to have one-on-one talks, but I think because we're headed more into a digital space, a digital realm, literally I saw a YouTube where this guy was filming an Instagram model doing her little, video thing, and I'm like, and I just saw how ridiculous she looked.
And how good it looks in the
And
video.
how good it looks. I'm like, man, this is what men are lusting over. That. And so it is a whole world that we have created as society called social media, and it has its own rules, it has its own logic, it has its own ways of thinking, and we are called
Bro,
to
that's
interact
so-
with that.
People look ridiculous out here and look brilliant in there.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Bro, that's wild.
But doesn't that define the thing? Like,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous,
It's absurd.
right?
Mhm.
But in the social landscape, it's super cool, like this. But that's the problem. When on
Mhm.
the outside it looks ridiculous,
Mhm.
it's because it is.
Yeah.
In reality, right? But
Right.
we're not living in reality. We created an alternate
Right.
reality, right?
And that's
Yeah.
the issue, right?
Mhm.
And I wonder if that practice proves the foolishness of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
have to look silly out here to look brilliant in there.
Yeah. But
And why would you
yeah.
choose that? Why would you choose to look silly?
That's a good one. Well, let me get back to that. Because that's good though, right? Because I mean, I dabbled into that. Now this is back in the day, okay, when Vine was a thing.
I remember
Vines
Vines,
was
yeah.
a thing, right?
6-second clips.
Bro, I was ready to look silly,
Right.
to look cool for 6 seconds.
Right. 6 seconds of fame.
Like literally. And I think because of that, I think we have to understand what that feeds off of. It feeds off the natural design of humanity, which is acknowledgement, acceptance, love, positivity, right? This goes back to the idea of acceptance, right? So we're willing to look silly to be accepted in a world that really doesn't even exist.
Right.
And so, but because it is a world that metaphysically exists, we're called to be in that. So to some degree, we have to be that city set on a hill,
Almost like the spiritual realm.
to some degree. Yeah. Yeah, to some degree. That's we have to flush that out, what that means. Because the spiritual world existed even before social media.
It's a metaphor.
But I
Just
get
like
you.
the one that
I
you
get
said.
you.
It's a
I
metaphor,
understand. But
okay?
That has a lot of implications there, guy.
it does. But
Metaphor.
I think like the challenge of the church is to
Unintended.
be I think the challenge of the church is to be a city set on a hill on the internet. And what does that look
That's
like
good.
for us?
Yeah.
Right. How do we be a city set on a hill in social media?
I think to tracking me on this, I'm answering your question in real time.
Mm-hmm.
I think about it like I think about anything else. Like we step into that space, but the invitation is out of it.
Say that again.
That we step into the space, but the invitation is out of the space. So we're stepping in to invite people out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm stepping into the digital space to invite people into the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Because-
Sounds like scripture to me.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, I think about Jesus being in Caesarea Philippi, right? And he
Mm.
says, on this rock, I'll build my church.
Yeah.
And we know that there was all types of foolishness going on.
Mm-hmm.
Is he saying that like he's going to build his church at the club?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, not in a literal sense, like Club Jesus. That's not what he's saying. He's saying he's going to reach those people, right?
Mm-hmm.
These types of people are going to be in the kingdom, so to speak. They're going to be invited out of the life that they're living into the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in the same way, we have to do that. But I think about the importance, I think about of inviting people out of the digital space and into reality is because of the way God ordered the world, like our need for connection, our need to be in nature, our need to slow down so we can experience God. Like all of those things have to be practices that can't be lost by the local church. And I think the thing I'm always concerned with is we'll just become a part of the noise that is social media because we're just doing everything that everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we don't engage. It doesn't mean we don't post. It doesn't mean we don't say valuable things.
Right.
It doesn't mean we don't encourage each people. It doesn't mean we don't put our stuff on YouTube. So, because people like go on YouTube, watch sermons, they change their life. They show up at the church show. I watched you on YouTube for a couple months and then I turned up, or, you know, like that does really happen. Like that, your website, your social media is the front door now to your church. But what are we inviting them into? You know what I mean?
Because we have to realize how much foolishness am I willing to do as a church to invite them to come here, right? Because at some point, and you see it happening in some faiths, people are kind of feeding into what society says is okay.
Yeah.
Kind of saying, well, if I do this, I'm going to bring more people to Christ, or I'm going to get them to have a relationship. Well, what are you sacrificing? So I understand, like, there's foolishness that has to happen for you to be in that space, to be liked and loved and all that. But you have to be careful because you don't want to do too much to sway away from what the main thing is.
And is it like everything else? Like, do we send people into the digital space as missionaries? Like, are people digital missionaries now? Like, is that a thing?
That's interesting.
You know, like, are there people that are designed, equipped, shaped to enter into that world in ways that others can't?
Yeah.
On behalf of the church to pull people back out into the local church? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, we send people to other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Like people will do ministries where they go to, strip clubs, or they're rescuing people out of sex trafficking or whatever. Is it a thing where it's like, yo, we have digital missionaries?
Yeah. I don't see nothing wrong with that. I think if there is a thing of being called, which there is, I'm not saying, I'm just I do think there are people that are meant for social media. I do think that I've ran across people that are Christians and they do all sorts of things. Like there's this one guy I follow. He plays Call of Duty and he's very good. He could be a pro, and he's a Christian. And all he does is talk about the Bible and Christianity and how to be, pure and things like that. And then he hops on Call of Duty and he gets like 60 kills. And so I think there are people that are just made for social media. They reach who they can reach. I think that's the point. Reach who you can reach. And whoever is put in your life, you influence them, you talk to them, and you be in their life.
So to your point, bringing it back to Gen Z, is it a situation where if they're really good at video games, we say to them like, yo, how can you glorify God on your platform?
Yeah.
Right.
How does that become an evangelistic opportunity? You got several thousand followers. Are you talking to them about the gospel?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Do you go win a game tournament for the sake of influencing that community to Christ?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, is that the play with them as they step into those types of spaces? You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I also think you just got to be prepared to have the church has to be prepared to have these conversations. And it's from my experience, and I can only speak from that, right? And just my personal living in the world as a Christian, the gospel comes slow, bro. It doesn't just like, you meet someone, you give them the gospel and that's it. No, it's like, now I have a relationship with you and I genuinely like you. I genuinely love you. And I like having conversations with you. And every once in a while, religion comes up. And we'll talk about that. But I actually want you to be in my life. And I want you to know my family. I want you to come over and have my mom's fried chicken. I want you to play games with me. Right now, I'm creating a relationship with you. So to some degree, you're making friends. And then sometimes, sooner or later, the gospel is going to just come up. So I think we just got to be patient in that area as well. And I think because we're talking about how can the church is going to have to be patient.
Right.
If you want a revival, if you want this big spiritual change, you got to be patient, and you have to literally prepare yourself, not just in prayer and fasting, but it just being that community of people, and know when you're going to go and when you're going to stay and go. Like for example, Denzel. We all know Denzel's a Christian, and he used to always go to those big celebrity parties, and he'll show up and have a good time, but at 9:00 he's gone because he knows it's about to get a little crazy, and so he dips. He goes home to his family, but he's always there, having conversations, being a light, having motivating, and you know how motivational he sounds. But he leaves when it's 9:00. He dips, and so I do think when it speaks to that, be careful not sacrificing that
your witness.
Exactly. But also, you're called to engage,
right?
Just as Christ, he engaged. He was in the presence of the poor, of the evil. He was there, and he was chilling, and he wasn't afraid, and he didn't back down from conversations.
Yep.
And so I think we have to do the same thing.
Yeah,
you know.
That's good.
No, I just think that this, we're seeing an influx of young people, and I sound old when I say the young people, but the young people are yearning for community. They're yearning for a small church. They're yearning for the things that maybe their parents had talked about at one point. So we need to capitalize on the opportunity to say, hey, we are here for you. You don't need to be in the digital land space to feel accepted, wanted, and seen. You don't need, OnlyFans or whatever to do that. You have a community that wants to see you and love you and care for you. And that's through Jesus. So but the other thing that I always struggle with is whenever we have differencing of opinions, you're not my friend anymore.
Bro.
And that's so difficult.
Talk about that.
Currently. Because if we don't believe the same thing, I can't hang out with you. We can't break bread together.
Yeah.
But opening to the idea of like, hey, I like the ideas that you have.
Yeah.
I'll contemplate it. Let's just chop it up.
Yeah.
I don't have to like it, but then I'm going to understand you better. And that gives me an opportunity to potentially share the gospel with you.
Yeah.
Bro, I've been meaning to land the plane for about 10 minutes. So I'm going to answer that question. And then we land in this plane.
Okay.
But, bro, I think that's an hour. We could.
Go get some breakfast and come back.
We already had breakfast.
So lunch.
Are you sure about that?
I did.
Or are we just an appetizer?
Sure. Wow. But to your point, I think that's an incredible point, bro, because once again, I think the way social media works and the way the world works has crept into how we engage each other as a church.
Right.
I think we now are more prone to make secondary issues primary issues. Like we don't believe the same thing about baptism, or we don't believe the same thing about how the Holy Spirit operates today, or we don't believe the same thing about, I don't know, how often you should take communion, or what it looks like to meet as a church. And so now it's like all these things that were beautiful differences in the mosaic of the body of Christ have now become these like dividing lines where it's like we're determining who's in and out. And it's like, bro, I don't have the ability to determine who's in or out. That's up to the Lord, not me.
Essentials and non-essentials, bro.
100%, bro. And so I think that's a great point. Like, in Gen Z seeing that, Gen A seeing that, you know what I mean? And like, how does that make us different from social media if we're just willing to allow the influences of the world to polarize us the same way it's polarizing everything else?
Right.
And I think once again, that's one of the ways we push back. Jesus said it best. John 17, they will know that I am the one that was sent when they are one. Right. And so like unity, like, and how do we have unity as the body of Christ? And I think that is also something, I'll land the plane here, that is incredibly essential. Like, how does the body of Christ across the socioeconomic, across cultural, across ethnic, across denominational lines show that it's the body of Christ? And I think if we can start to figure out how to do that, that's going to have massive implications for what Gen Z thinks about the church. If you're a youth pastor in your local city, man, how can you partner with other youth pastors? If you're a senior pastor, how can you partner with other pastors? And yes, you might have theological differences, but how can you keep Jesus central
and
do things together centered around that, and let people show up where they show up. Whatever church they go to, it's all good. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, I think, and I'm not saying there isn't things that it's like, hey, that's outside the bounds. There are.
Right.
But like in terms of what we tend to argue about, it's not those things.
That's right. No, 100% agree.
Yo, dope conversation.
It was good.
Really good.
Great. Thanks
I
for
feel-
having me.
Yeah, bro.
I'm glad you
to
came,
do it.
bro.
Yeah,
We're
but-
definitely
Real.
going to do it again.
Heck
Yeah.
I feel like this conversation deserves a part 2 for sure. So I think we're going to pick this one up again in a couple months
Mhm.
and have another conversation about Gen Z in the church as we keep learning.
Yeah.
But anyways, as we always say, this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end. Questions, comments, concerns, you know where to find us. We love you. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.